Let me tell you about the day humanity got grounded by the entire Galactic Council. No war, no failed negotiations. Just bureaucratic humiliation on a cosmic scale. Picture this. Marcus Vex, a relatively unremarkable human ambassador, standing in front of a sealed vault door in the Galactic Council headquarters. Not because he was trying to rob the place, but because he was supposed to be attending a budget meeting. A budget meeting, mind you. The least threatening activity in the known universe, yet here we are, locked out like teenagers trying to sneak into a concert. The thing about the Council is that they're phenomenal at two things: advanced technology and spectacular arrogance. You put those two things together and you get what happened to humanity. Complete and total patronization, wrapped in good intentions. See, about 3 years ago, humanity got its invitation to join the Galactic Council. It was like your weird cousin finally getting invited to the family dinner after everyone thought you were still in diapers. The Council took one look at our history, the wars, the pollution, the cat videos, and made a decision. They decided we needed what they called a containment protocol. Basically, every door was locked. Not metaphorically, actually locked. Every single door in every Council facility. The reasoning was absolutely logical if you were a 9-foot-tall crystalline being with the emotional range of a calculator. Humans were unpredictable and prone to chaos, so they implemented what they called the Open Door Initiative. Ironically, it meant closing every door. We couldn't access the archives, the research facilities, the cafeteria, nothing. We were given one designated corridor with pre-approved materials and a single bathroom. A single bathroom for 12 human ambassadors. Do you understand the psychological warfare of that move? The Council wasn't being cruel. They were being careful. Like careful zookeepers watching a cage full of chimps with thumbs. Marcus had been dealing with this indignity for months. He'd watched other species waltz through facilities that were off-limits to humans. He'd seen a delegation of the Quix theory, who literally reproduce through binary fission and can't even comprehend individual identity, granted access to the Quantum Research Division. But humans? Humans got a corridor and a single stall. On the day everything changed, Marcus was walking through the restricted administrative wing trying to find a meeting room that wasn't locked. Which was stupid because they were all locked, every single one. But there was something different about this particular section of the building. The doors here were older, weathered, like they'd been there since before the Council went full paranoia mode. He leaned against one wall, frustrated, and that's when he noticed something peculiar. A maintenance panel. Old, covered in a layer of dust thick enough to write your name in. Wait, what? Marcus pulled up the technical specifications on his portable device. His hands were actually shaking. According to the files, these doors, all these doors, were built on a security infrastructure designed by humans, not current humans, ancient humans. His ancestors had engineered the basic security framework that the Council had literally built their entire headquarters around. They just never bothered updating it. Which meant the original authentication protocols were still there, buried under centuries of upgrades and patches and bureaucratic layers. But there, waiting, like a time bomb nobody knew was ticking. And Marcus, in that moment, realized something beautiful, something that would fundamentally reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. The authentication protocol was voice-based, and not just any voice. It was keyed to recognize human vocal patterns, specifically, the frequency modulation of human whistling. Nobody whistled anymore. Nobody had whistled in centuries. Everybody had moved on to neural link communications and quantum encrypted transmissions. Whistling was dead. Obsolete. Which meant nobody, absolutely nobody, had thought to update the security system against it. Marcus stood there in that dusty corridor, staring at a maintenance panel from 1,000 years ago, and he started to smile. The thing about ancient technology is that it usually fails in boring ways. Systems decay, components corrode. Everything just sort of stops working until you get a specialist to fix it. But sometimes, just sometimes, you get lucky and find something that works in spectacularly unintended ways. Marcus spent the next 3 hours in the restricted archive wing, the one that had been locked to him for months, reading about the ancient security systems. It was like watching a horror movie where the monster is incompetence. The original infrastructure was designed in the mid-29th century. Humans, back then, had figured out that vocal pattern recognition was incredibly efficient. They built entire facilities around it. Doors opened to authorized voices. Restricted areas could be accessed through specific vocal codes. It was cutting-edge technology for the time. Then, aliens showed up, and humans went from being the smartest species in their solar system to being the weird mammals everyone invited to parties out of pity. The Galactic Council absorbed human technology, upgraded it, patched it, built 17 new layers on top of it, and basically forgot that any of it was human-designed in the first place. The beautiful part? The authentication protocols were never actually removed. They were just buried. Like a skeleton in the attic that nobody bothered to look at because there was a brand new kitchen installed over it. Marcus found the technical documentation that explained everything. The original whistling protocol used a specific frequency range, typically between 800 and 8,000 hertz. It required a specific pattern of modulation. Simple, really. A human could just walk up to a door, whistle, and it would open because the system recognized them as authorized personnel. Authorized personnel being humans. All of them. Because in the 29th century, nobody thought that would ever be a problem. Why would you lock a human out of a human-designed facility? The Council, in their infinite wisdom, had never questioned why these systems existed. They'd just assumed they were decorative, like they assumed humans were decorative. Interesting to look at, nice for variety, but fundamentally harmless and not worth taking seriously. Marcus laughed, actually laughed, right there in an archive that technically he shouldn't even be in, because he was reading the security specifications for what would become the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen, and it was written in language so simple he could have understood it in high school. The really funny part was discovering how dependent everything had become on this infrastructure. The new alien security systems, the ones they were so proud of, were layered on top of the old human systems, like someone building a skyscraper on top of a house and then wondering why the foundation matters. 92% of the Council headquarters doors were still connected to the legacy authentication protocols. All the upgrades and patches had worked around it, never bothering to actually replace it. Why replace something that works, especially when you don't even know it's still there? Marcus started testing his theory carefully. He went to a sealed door in a quiet section of the building. There was nobody around. Just him. A door that had been locked to every human for the past 3 years, and his vocal cords. He cleared his throat, took a breath, and whistled. Just a simple, clear note. High, clean, sustained. The kind of whistle you'd make while walking to get coffee on a Tuesday morning. The door hummed, a soft sound, electrical, mechanical, ancient, but unmistakably functional. The lock engaged, the seal disengaged, and the door slid open. Marcus stood there, staring through the open doorway, and whispered, "Oh, this is going to be fun." He went through systematically. Conference rooms, research labs, observation decks. Every door he tried, he whistled, and every single door opened. Not because the Council was letting him in, but because they'd forgotten that they were letting him in by not bothering to remove the old authentication protocols. By the time he reached the restricted observation deck overlooking the quantum processing center, Marcus wasn't even nervous anymore. He was running on pure adrenaline and the most satisfying sense of irony he'd ever experienced. The Council had locked every door against humanity. They'd done it out of caution, out of superiority, out of the absolute certainty that humans were too chaotic to be trusted with access to important facilities. And they'd locked them using human-designed systems from 1,000 years ago. The universe has a sense of humor. Sometimes it just takes a while to catch the joke. By the time Marcus finished his initial exploration, he'd accessed exactly 47 restricted areas. He hadn't taken anything, hadn't disturbed anything, had just walked through doors that had been closed to him, looked at things he wasn't supposed to see, and walked back out. All while whistling. It was like the most satisfying act of civil disobedience in recorded history. What happened next was chaos. beautiful, predictable chaos. He started doing it when other people were around, not aggressively, just casually. He'd be walking down a corridor with other diplomats, approach a sealed door, give a cheerful whistle, and walk through. The reactions were priceless. The first time was with Ambassador Klethik, a Vorton delegate. 6-armed, purple, about as intimidating as they come. They were both trying to get to the main conference room when they found themselves facing a locked door. Klethik reached for the standard access panel, looked frustrated, and said something in their native language that probably wasn't complimentary. Marcus just smiled. "I got this." He whistled. The door opened. Klethik's eye stalks did something I can only describe as a double take. If you've never seen a 6-armed alien entity experience genuine confusion, you haven't lived. "How did you—" Klethik started. "Legacy authentication," Marcus said, walking through. "It's a human thing. You wouldn't understand." Which was the most fun thing about this whole situation. Marcus was finally in a position to be mysterious and impressive. For 3 years, humans had been the bumbling underdog species that everyone tolerated out of pity. Now, he was walking through locked doors like he was in a secret agent movie. Word spread fast. By the end of the day, half the diplomats on the station knew about it. By the end of the week, it was legendary. The council tried to figure out what was happening. They sent engineers to check the doors. They ran diagnostics on the security systems. They found absolutely nothing because nobody thought to check the legacy protocols. Those were ancient, obsolete. They wouldn't even show up on a standard security scan. Marcus, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He whistled his way into the archives and read everything. He whistled his way into the research division and actually understood what they were working on. He whistled his way into private council chambers and sat in chairs he wasn't supposed to sit in. The best part, the council couldn't actually catch him doing anything wrong. They'd locked the doors, which meant accessing them without authorization was technically against protocol. But they couldn't figure out how he was accessing them. The security logs showed the doors being opened by legitimate authentication codes. The legacy protocols were registering his whistles as valid authorization. Because they were valid, by their own standards, using their own systems, using human-designed systems that had been there since before any of the current council members were even born. There was one particularly funny incident when Marcus whistled into the council treasury, which was probably a mistake on his part, but the look on the treasurer's face when he discovered a human casually standing in the vault was worth every minute of the fallout. The treasurer, whose name was something like Vixthorough but pronounced in a way that required 3 lungs to produce correctly, actually sat down. Just collapsed into a chair right there in the vault. His 17 assistants were running around like their heads had been replaced with emergency klaxons. Marcus, to his credit, just looked apologetic. "I got lost," he said. "The conference room is supposed to be down here somewhere, right?" It wasn't down there. It was 3 wings over in a completely different direction. But the confusion was beautiful. The council held an emergency session, an actual full-on emergency meeting. They called it security-related, but everyone knew what it really was. It was a public freakout about the fact that their entire security infrastructure had been compromised by a human with a good pitch. Marcus attended the meeting, naturally. He had access now. And he sat in the observation gallery, perfectly calm, waiting for someone to figure it out. Council leader Zorthax, a being made of something that might have been crystals, might have been frozen energy, definitely wasn't something that existed in normal space-time, opened the proceedings by asking the most important question. "How is this possible?" It didn't sound angry. It sounded genuinely baffled, like discovering that gravity had changed and nobody told them. All eyes turned to Marcus. He stood up, slowly, calmly, and he whistled. The observation gallery doors, which had been sealed for 3 years, swung open wide. Then he sat back down and smiled. The council security forces basically dragged Marcus into the primary chamber. Not violently. Aliens, despite their various forms and philosophies, are generally pretty civilized when it comes to physically restraining a single human. But there was definitely a sense of, "We need to talk to you, and we're not taking no for an answer," about the whole thing. Marcus was actually surprisingly calm about it. He'd been expecting something like this for about a week now. It was inevitable that eventually the council would figure out what was happening and demand an explanation. He'd been preparing his delivery the whole time. Council leader Zorthax sat at the head of the chamber, flanked by representatives from every major species in the Galactic Alliance. There was Clethic, looking sympathetic. There was Ambassador Shrila from the Quantian Collective, who had somewhere between 2 and 4 physical manifestations, depending on how you counted. There was the Vex Thorin contingent, who were basically sentient mathematics and communicated mostly through equations. Basically, every species that had collectively decided humans needed to be put in a containment corridor. Zorthax gestured to the center of the chamber. "Explain yourself, Ambassador Vex. How did you breach our security systems?" Marcus took a breath. This was the moment. Everything about humanity's place in the galaxy potentially hinged on how he answered this question. "I whistled," he said. "Silence. The kind of silence that happens when you're expecting a complex, technical explanation and someone just gives you 2 words. You whistled?" Shrila repeated, and there was enough skepticism in those words to power a small moon. "That's correct," Marcus said. "I whistled at the doors and they opened. It's really quite simple, actually. Zorthax's crystalline structure seemed to vibrate with something that might have been frustration. That is not an adequate explanation. Our security systems are theoretically unbreachable. They incorporate technology from dozens of civilizations. They feature quantum-level encryption, AI-driven threat assessment protocols, and multidimensional access authentication. You cannot simply whistle at them." "And yet," Marcus said, pulling up the technical specifications on the chamber display. "Here we are." He showed them the documentation, the ancient, human-designed security framework, the legacy protocols buried under centuries of upgrades, the fact that the entire council headquarters was built on a foundation of 29th century human engineering. The reaction was like watching someone realize they'd been wearing their underwear on the outside the whole time. Clethic was the first to recover. "So you're telling us that your species designed our security infrastructure?" "Not just the security infrastructure," Marcus said, scrolling through the files. "The power distribution systems, the climate control, the water purification units, the communications relay stations, basically all the foundational infrastructure. It was the initial trade agreement when humans first made contact with your civilization. We built it, you paid us, everyone went home happy." He looked directly at Zorthax. "And then you kept building on top of it without ever bothering to actually replace the original systems, because they worked, and you were too arrogant to think they needed to be replaced. The authentication protocol is keyed to human vocal patterns," said one of the Vex Thorin mathematicians, processing the information. "Specifically, the frequency modulation associated with human whistling. Which means, technically, all humans have had continuous access to all restricted areas this entire time. The security wasn't preventing access. It was a silent authorization mechanism that nobody thought to revoke." "Exactly," Marcus said. "Your containment protocol locked every door, but I could walk through all of them. Because you forgot that you locked them with the code I designed." There was another long silence, the kind where everyone's processing that they've made a tactical error of genuinely impressive proportions. Shrila's multiple manifestations seemed to vibrate. "This is unacceptable. We'll upgrade the security systems immediately, replace all the legacy protocols." "With what?" Marcus asked. "The systems you'll get now, you'll need to hire human consultants to implement, because every time you modify human-designed infrastructure without understanding how it works, you break something. You want to upgrade the security? You have to go through us. Or, you could just accept that maybe humans deserve the same access privileges as every other species in the council." It was perfect. He'd essentially turned the table so completely that there was no longer a table. The council couldn't lock him out without potentially compromising their own infrastructure. They couldn't upgrade their systems without human help. And humans were, by their own previous logic, still too chaotic to be trusted with the knowledge of how to fix their own systems. Zorthax leaned back in its chair. "What are you proposing, Ambassador?" Marcus smiled. "Full council access for all human delegates, membership on all committees, access to restricted research and resources, and a formal apology for the containment protocol. That's extortion, Srila said. No, Marcus replied. That's just remembering that we're the architects of your house. You might be living in it now, but we're the ones who know how it was built, and that knowledge has value. The council looked at each other, had a lot of silent conversations that probably went something like, "Oh God, the humans are right, and we've made a spectacular mistake." Finally, Zorthak spoke. "We'll need to conduct a full review of all legacy systems in the facility." "Of course," Marcus said. "I can help with that, as a full council member with unrestricted access." And there it was. Checkmate in 3 moves. All Marcus needed was a whistle and the galaxy's most advanced civilization's own arrogance. The negotiations took 3 weeks, 3 weeks of the council trying to figure out how much they owed humanity, how much they could get away with offering, and whether there was any way to resolve this without admitting they'd monumentally misunderstood the situation. There wasn't. Marcus had moved past casual bargaining into what could only be described as gleeful exploitation of the Council's collective panic. In Conference Room 7, which he now accessed by whistling at the door while maintaining direct eye contact with Zorthax, Marcus laid out humanity's position. "For the past 3 years," he said, "humanity has been placed under containment protocols. We've been denied access to Council resources. We've been barred from research initiatives. We've been treated like a potential threat to galactic stability." He pulled up a holographic display showing every restriction placed on humans over the past 36 months. "Meanwhile," he continued, "the Council has been operating a civilization-spanning infrastructure built entirely on human-designed systems. Systems that, if they fail, would essentially cause a cascading collapse of every major facility in this sector, and we've been locked out of maintaining them." Srila tried to interrupt. "We can train other species on the maintenance protocols." "Can you?" Marcus asked. "Because the last time someone from your civilization tried to modify a legacy system without understanding the underlying architecture, you knocked out power to the entire East Wing for 6 hours. I read the incident report. It's still in the archives. Well, it was. Now it's sealed because you were embarrassed." Which was technically true. Marcus had read the incident report. He'd read everything in the archives. That was the whole point. He scrolled through his demands. Full membership for all human diplomats. Seats on the Scientific Council. Access to the Innovation Board. Joint custody of the Legacy Infrastructure Maintenance Division. And most importantly, humans would control all updates, patches, and modifications to the foundational systems. "You're asking us to cede control of our primary infrastructure to a species we've known for less than a decade," Clethic said, not unkindly. "No," Marcus corrected. "I'm asking you to acknowledge that you never had control of your primary infrastructure. You were just living in a house built by humans and never bothered to learn how the plumbing works. I'm suggesting that maybe you should, since we're willing to teach you." The mathematician Vex Thorens ran calculations. Srila consulted with her multiple manifestations. Clethic used all 6 arms to gesture expressively at something in the data that concerned them. Marcus just sat back and waited. He had all the leverage. He literally held the keys to their kingdom, and those keys were made of sound waves that only human vocal cords could produce. By the end of the first week, the Council had acknowledged that humans deserved equal Council status. By the end of the second week, they'd agreed to human participation in all restricted research areas. By the end of the third week, they'd formally apologized and committed to a massive infrastructure overhaul that would require human supervision and consultation. The best part was watching Zorthax actually say the words. "The Galactic Council was wrong to implement the containment protocols," the Council leader stated, in what Marcus could only describe as an impressively painful moment of admission. "Humanity has demonstrated capabilities and knowledge that we failed to appreciate. We welcome our human colleagues as equal partners in this civilization." Marcus, who was professional about most things, allowed himself a small smile. "Now," Zorthax continued, "we must address the question of how we prevent this situation from happening in the future. We need comprehensive documentation of all legacy systems. We need training protocols. We need—" You need to stop treating entire species like potential disasters waiting to happen, Marcus interrupted. You need to assume good faith in your fellow council members instead of wrapping them in restrictions born from fear and superior attitudes. And you need to maintain humility about the fact that you're standing on the shoulders of civilizations that came before you. The chamber was quiet. Very quiet. Then Clethic started applauding. All 6 hands involved. It was rhythmically confusing, but genuinely encouraging. One by one, the other ambassadors joined in. Even Shrila, in a grudging sort of way. Zorthax sat there, crystalline structure somehow managing to convey exhaustion, and said, "Welcome to the Council, Ambassador Vex, fully and officially. For what it's worth, this is the first time in recorded history that a species has leveraged our own infrastructure against us to gain political equality." "I'm just honored to be the first," Marcus said. 6 months later, Marcus Vex walked into the Grand Council chamber for the first time with unrestricted access. He approached the primary entrance, the ceremonial doors that had been locked to humanity since the beginning of their council membership. He whistled. The doors swung open. It was unnecessary, really. He had a security clearance now. He could have just used the standard access panel like everyone else. But some moments deserved ceremony. The chamber itself was almost unrecognizable from when he'd first arrived on the station. The infrastructure was being systematically upgraded, but under human guidance. Scientists from Earth worked alongside Quantian engineers, Vorthan architects, and Vex-Thoran mathematical systems specialists. It looked like organized chaos, which was probably the most human thing about it. Zorthax greeted him at the central platform. "The infrastructure assessment is proceeding ahead of schedule. Your team has identified approximately 400 legacy systems that were operating beyond their intended capacity. We would have experienced critical failures within the decade." "Easily avoided," Marcus said. "Most of it is just preventive maintenance. The systems are solid. Your civilization built on a good foundation, just needed someone to check on it regularly. Instead, we locked you out," Shrila observed. She was there with her usual number of manifestations, though today it seemed like maybe one extra. Marcus wasn't entirely sure how to count. "Water under the bridge," Marcus said, though there was still an edge to his tone. "We're past that now. The important thing is moving forward." The council meeting proceeded normally. Budget proposals, research initiatives, trade agreements, all the mundane business that governed interstellar civilization. But there was something different about it now. When a human spoke, the others actually listened. When humans proposed initiatives, they weren't met with suspicion and containment protocols. Equality, it turned out, tasted like common sense. After the meeting concluded, Marcus made his way back through the halls he could now access without whistling, though he did occasionally whistle anyway, just because he could. Just because it amused him. Just because the universe rewarded audacity. Clethic caught up with him in one of the central corridors. "I've been meaning to ask," the Vorthan said. "Was the whistling always the plan, or did you genuinely just stumble upon it?" Marcus grinned. "Genuinely stumbled. But I've never been one to pass up a good opportunity when the universe hands it to me." "Your species is remarkable," Clethic said. "The ability to improvise, to find solutions in chaos, to see problems as opportunities. We were wrong to fear it." "You weren't wrong to be cautious," Marcus said. "You were just wrong to let caution become condescension. We're chaotic, sure. But chaos has value. It's where new ideas come from." By the end of the month, humanity had been assigned its first major research project: development of the next generation of quantum processors. It made sense, given that humans had designed the foundational systems and understood the architecture better than anyone else. It was also hilarious because it meant the entire Galactic Council was now dependent on the species they'd tried to contain, learning from the species they'd tried to restrict, and trusting the species they'd tried to lock out. The irony was so thick, you could have cut it with a knife. Marcus stood in the main observatory of the Council station one evening, looking out at the galaxy. Billions of stars, billions of civilizations. All of them connected now through infrastructure that humans had built 1,000 years ago and never bothered to tell anyone about. Behind him, he could hear construction crews, working on the new hybrid security systems. Human-designed legacy protocols interfaced with Quantian quantum encryption and Vex-Thorin mathematical access control. It would be the most secure system in the galaxy, built on a foundation of understanding rather than fear. Shrila found him there. "Contemplating the view?" she asked, manifesting in a friendly configuration. "Just thinking about how weird it is," Marcus said. "A week ago, I couldn't get past a locked door. Now I'm helping redesign the entire galactic security infrastructure." "What changed?" Shrila asked. "I whistled," Marcus said, "and they opened." Shrila made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your civilization has an absolutely baffling approach to problem-solving. We spent months developing containment protocols when you just needed to remember that you designed the building we were trying to keep you out of." "That's the human way," Marcus said. "Work with what you've got. Remember what you've built, and never underestimate the power of a good whistle." He turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, Earth scientists were probably already making jokes about it. The day humanity crashed the Galactic Council's security with their vocal cords. The day a guy named Marcus literally whistled his way to political equality. Humanity's first full participation in the Council wasn't marked by military achievement or scientific breakthrough. It was marked by the simple fact that the universe's most advanced civilization had forgotten they were standing on human-made foundations. And now they couldn't forget it if they tried. Because every time Marcus walked through a door, every time a human accessed a facility, every time the legacy authentication systems recognized a human whistle and responded, the Council was reminded. You built on our foundation. You forgot who gave you the blueprint, and now you have to remember the universe has a sense of humor, and humanity had finally gotten the joke. As Marcus turned to leave the observatory, he whistled a cheerful tune, almost unconsciously. Behind him, the observation deck doors swung open. Of course they did. They always did now, and would continue to do so, long after the Council learned to whistle as well.